Welcome to the Queensland Media Club. I'm Hayden Johnson, the State Political Editor of the Courier Mail. Today, you'll receive the first update on the progress of the critical next steps in the 2032 delivery plan for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, delivered by our guest, State Development, Infrastructure, Planning, Industrial Relations Minister, Queensland's Deputy Premier, Jarrod Bleijie. Jarrod grew up on the Sunshine Coast and was elected to Parliament in 2009 at the age of 27. A former commercial lawyer, Jarrod's previously held senior cabinet positions, including Attorney General and Minister for Justice. He currently chairs the Cabinet Housing Task Force, leading the implementation and delivery of the $2 billion Residential Activation Fund to unlock more housing supply, along with planning reforms in consultation with Queensland's local councils. He oversees the industrial relations productivity reforms to deliver Queensland's largest infrastructure pipeline, including critically the generational infrastructure for our 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games and beyond. Please join me in welcoming Queensland's Deputy Premier, Jarrod Bleijie.
Well, thank you very much, Hayden, for the introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be here, and how exciting is the room. You can feel it in the room. We're getting on, we're delivering 2032, and you're all going to be part of it. So thank you very much to the Media Club, the Queensland Media Club, and to 3Plus, and all our wonderful sponsors for hosting today's lunch. Can I acknowledge Attorney General Deb Frecklington. Deb, great to see you here, supporting me and the team. Thank you very much. Federal Minister for Infrastructure, Catherine King. Great to see you, Catherine. And many will wonder why the Federal Infrastructure Minister is joining as my little special guest today. We may or may not have a little announcement in a little time. Ponder that thought. My Assistant Minister, Rebecca Young, Member for Redlands. Great to see you here, Rebecca, as well. Ladies and gentlemen, the journey for 2032 started in 2015 when a group of mayors in southeast Queensland got together with Graham Quirk and looked at the 2032 and said, we can do it in Brisbane. That's where the journey started in 2015. And I've got to tell you that it was actually the LNP opposition at the time that was first out of the barracks in supporting the 2032 Games, Olympic and Paralympic Games for 2032 in Brisbane. And it's fitting, Deb Frecklington, our Attorney General, that you're here today, because it was actually Deb Frecklington, when she was Leader of the Opposition in 2019, that for the first time in the Queensland Parliament, in her budget reply speech, said the Queensland Opposition LNP support the bid for the Olympic and Paralympic Games 2032, and we've got to go for gold. So, Deb, I don't know if you remember you said that, but thank you for being here today. When the new government was elected in October last year, we asked Queenslanders to give us 100 days to sort out what could be described as a bit of a mess. An Olympiad had passed since Queensland was awarded the Games, and we asked Queenslanders to give us 100 days to sort it out. And within 100 days, I put legislation into the Parliament to set up the Games Independent Infrastructure Coordination Authority, which I will refer to as GICA from now on. So GICA legislation was passed within 100 days. I also set up the board, ably led by Chairman Stephen Conry, who's an apology today. But I want to thank the board for all the amazing effort they've put in. We then tasked the board, after having legislated it within 100 days, to do a 100-day review to give the government an indication of what we need to do to get the Olympic and Paralympic Games back on track. We were not supportive of temporary stadiums at QSAC of $2.25 billion. We wanted legacy. We wanted transformational infrastructure, generational infrastructure, road and rail projects, something that after 2032, Queenslanders who aren't interested in sport can look back and say, we got this infrastructure because of the Games, not necessarily the sport, but the infrastructure required. The GICA then did their 100-day review and came up with the recommendations, of which the government, through Premier Crisafulli and I, delivered the 2032 delivery plan. And it's a plan that I'm very proud of, and you all have a copy of that with you today. Part of our 2032 delivery plan decoupled the arena because we thought proceeding with a market-led proposal with the interest from the private sector would be a far better benefit for the Australian and the Queensland taxpayer. And you've got copies. I've just recently come back from the United States where I took the initial document over there, and I've got to tell you, there is global interest in stadia and arenas in Brisbane. So we've made a decision to decouple the arena, but ladies and gentlemen, Brisbane will have an amazing arena at the GoPrin site. It'll be a 17,000-seat arena. The private sector will invest in it, and what government has is land at the GoPrin site. And when the Gabba comes down after cricket, will be an Olympic and Paralympic sport. I can assure you of that, because if LA's got it, which they do, Queensland definitely has to have it. And as the Premier said, when Australia wins gold at the Gabba in 2032, the Gabba will then come down and that whole area will be transformed into housing, parklands, you name it, urbanisation, with the arena right next door at the GoPrin site. Our delivery plan includes a 63,000-seat new stadium at Victoria Park, a national aquatic centre, the RNA Eka 20,000-seat outdoor arena, 3 athletes' villages, Queensland Tennis Centre upgrades, whitewater rafting in Redlands, transport connectivity, para-sport legacy. And we haven't forgotten about regional Queensland. The Premier and I and the government were determined to make sure this wasn't just Brisbane. This was about all of regional Queensland. You know, we had political parties go to the last state election wanting us to cancel the games, and we weren't going to do it. We backed the games. We backed the games since 2015, and we want to deliver the most amazing games in 2032, the best legacy for infrastructure, and not be an embarrassment on the world stage. Our delivery plan delivers this legacy. It includes the Sunshine Coast Arena, a Gold Coast Arena, and in regional Queensland, equestrian at Toowoomba, archery in Maryborough. And if you ask the government member for Maryborough, he's now going around calling Maryborough Olympic Borough. He's also Greek, and he has this natural attraction to Olympiads, so he's claiming Olympic Borough. Sailing in Townsville and Whitsundays, rowing on the mighty Fitzroy River in Rocky and Barlow Park in far north Queensland. We've also got a $250 million investment for the Games On program to make sure that if you're a little kid in regional Queensland, in the most remote part of Queensland, and you want a tennis court upgraded, you want a pool in your local community, you want a netball court, a basketball court, then so you should have those abilities and you should have those facilities just like a kid in southeast Queensland. So we have to make sure regional Queensland knows they benefit from it. I was sitting next to a Paralympian recently and he said to me, Jarrod, how on earth have you managed to get all the regional mayors supportive of the 2032 delivery plan? And I said, before the election, some of them were calling for the games to be scrapped. And now they see excitement in their communities because they're part of it and they want to be part of it. Collaboration is key, folks. Our collaboration with the International Olympic Committee, we hosted Kirsty Coventry, the incoming president of the IOC, recently at Parliament House, which was a great delegation, the AOC as well, local governments, and of course our federal government, which I'll get to in just a moment. We also, once we've done our review, which we promised to do a 100-day review, we did it. We promised to deliver a plan because Queenslanders just wanted us to get on with the job and deliver the games. We also need to lock in money for it. And I'm excited to say that in our budget last week, we locked in $5.15 billion for Olympic and Paralympic infrastructure and transport infrastructure in the next 4 years alone. $5.15 billion in the budget. That includes Logan to Gold Coast Faster Rail, the Wave on the Sunshine Coast, Bruce Highway upgrades, $9 billion. And I note, Minister King, you've been up here recently with Minister Mickelberg making great announcements about the 80-20 funding split and making the Bruce Highway safer, particularly for regional Queenslanders. And of course, money in the budget for our athletes' villages at the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast and Brisbane. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's delivery time. We've done the review, we've delivered the plan, we've locked away money in the budget, we've collaborated with the federal government, and now we've just got to get on and deliver it. We've got 7 years, we've got enough time, but time is ticking. We introduced and passed legislation that passed the Parliament last week. Legislation that we didn't take lightly, but legislation that was necessary to ensure the infrastructure can be delivered on time. And that legislation particularly deals with transportation, mobility, connectivity, and also infrastructure both for venues, major and minor. It allows GECA to get on with the job, deliver Victoria Park, the new stadium in Brisbane, and it does override many laws in Queensland, planning laws, local government laws. But it's necessary laws that we didn't take lightly. We have to do it to ensure that we get the job done and shovels in the ground straight away. As I said, we promised we'd get on with the job of delivering these games, and today I can announce for you folks that procurement is opened as at 1 p.m. today for each of the 4 minor venues. Expressions of interest will be released on Q tender for a principal design consultant to undertake each project design for the following venues: the Logan Indoor Sports Centre, which addresses the growing demand for indoor sports in one of the fastest growing areas in Queensland. And I acknowledge Mayor John Raven here today. John, where are you? And mate, I just gave you $135 million last week in residential activation funding for housing. So you're doing well, mate. Well, you know, for a mayor that usually wears red, you're very grateful to a good LNP government. So well done, well done. My other mayors are jealous, John. My other mayors are jealous. We're a deal maker, right? We're doing deals all over the place. A brand new Moreton Bay Indoor Sports Centre, which will deliver a new flexible multi-sport and events facility for community, an event used to accommodate and increase participation in sports. The Sunshine Coast Outdoor Stadium, a well-established and well-utilised venue that will be upgraded to increase the size of the stadium from 1,046 to 10,680 permanent seats. And finally, up in far north Queensland in Cairns, the Barlow Park Stadium will receive major upgrades with increased seating capacity and spectator facilities, including a new grandstand with a permanent seating capacity of $5,000. Ladies and gentlemen, at 1 p.m. today, go on to 2032 delivery. Documents are live, expressions of interest live. We want your input to start the procurement process for those projects. I can also announce today the commencement of investigative works at Victoria Park today for the new Brisbane Stadium. We're not mucking around. These works are for geotechnical studies such as borehole drilling, soil sampling, which are essential for the understanding of the site's conditions. Additionally, topographical and boundary surveys will be conducted to accurately map the area and inform design and construction planning. And I can say today, and we may get to it in questions and answers, that despite some wonderful pictures I've seen in the media today, no location has been chosen for the site of Victoria Park Stadium. GECA will have to do that job. So Jess, I see from the board here, you might think all your work's done today, but it's not. GECA will get on with that and deliver that. Today, ladies and gentlemen, GECA's confirmed responsibilities, their focus in delivering the 17 new and upgraded venues, aligning with the 2032 delivery plan. And we are working at lightning speed. I'll also very shortly announce a permanent CEO of GECA. And once a CEO is in the role, GECA will go to procurement, public procurement, for a delivery partner. We've put money in this budget for GECA now to commence the procurement and deliver a delivery partner. To deliver this once-in-a-generation event, ladies and gentlemen, you need to work with partners and you need to collaborate. And for us, this started when we were undertaking the 100-day review and consulting with the Games delivery partners on the government's response, which was the 2032 delivery plan. That means working closely with the host local governments and the host city and Brisbane City Council that form part of the original bid. It also means working side by side with our funding partner. While the timing of the federal election meant that we had to pause the finalisation of the new funding deal, we worked calmly, methodically with our federal funding partners before the announcement of the 2032 delivery plan, before the election, giving them the brief on what we were doing with our delivery plan, and then soon after the federal election, renegotiating and consulting with our federal partners. It's somewhat fitting that my counterpart, Federal Infrastructure Minister Catherine King, is joining us here today, exactly 2 months since the federal election. And over that time, we've been working behind the scenes on what a renegotiated funding deal looks like for the Games 2032. For the Christopher Lee government, that has been a genuine equal partnership. We've not asked for another dollar from the Commonwealth funding, but simply, we may in transport later, but that will be Brent Mickelberg. But for the Olympic and the $7.1 billion, I've not asked a single dollar from the federal government, but simply an updated funding deal in recognition of our 2032 delivery plan for the Olympic and Paralympic venues needed. Before we get into the detail, I do want to acknowledge Catherine for the spirit in which you have had these discussions with me over the last 2 months. We've worked closely with the trust and respect that would be rightly expected, and the Christopher Lee government is glad to have been able to negotiate in good faith with the Commonwealth to get the best outcome for Queenslanders, but also all Australians. And I think that goes to show how we've managed to secure other funding deals with the federal government, be it the 80-20 funding for the Bruce Highway or the new education funding deal that the Prime Minister and the Premier recently struck. Despite being from different political persuasions, Catherine, we have worked well together in the state and in the national interest, and I thank you for that. And incidentally, I might add that when the Premier and the Prime Minister did a deal over education, they were doing it over cannoli. Catherine King and I have just done it the old-fashioned way. We pick up the phone, we talk about what's in the best interests of the state, the best deal we can get done. We haven't had to eat cannoli or any other desserts. But I did take advantage of the Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, recently for it was the first round of State of Origin. He came up here and I was in the box with the Premier and the Prime Minister. And as you would expect, the Premier and I were not as happy with the game, how it was going. The Prime Minister, on the other hand, was quite happy that New South Wales were in front. So I took him advantage of the Prime Minister while he was in a good mood. And I said that Minister King and I are working very well to secure a deal that ultimately will have to come to you and the Premier for sign-off. And note that, we are working well together. Anyway, we didn't have cannoli, but we had a sausage roll at the State of Origin, and he was very happy and the Premier and I were unhappy. But I'm happy with the deal we've struck. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, many are saying it could have never happened and it couldn't happen. I can announce today that the federal government and the state government have struck a deal. We are good to go for the Games 2032. I can announce that our respective governments have reached agreement and will shortly be signing the new intergovernmental agreement that locks in a deal to deliver the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. What today's deal means is certainty for Games infrastructure going forward. It means certainty for our infrastructure delivery program, for industry, for host communities and for workers that full funding has been secured. The deal includes the state and federal government committing 50-50 funding for the minor venues, a full reallocation of the arena funding, a $1.2 billion federal funds towards the Brisbane Stadium, and the remainder $584 million reserve to be held until tendering of the Brisbane Stadium or allocated to the minor venue program. With just over 7 years to go, we've had time to secure the best games ever and maximise the legacy benefits to come from hosting the Olympic and Paralympic Games for Queensland and indeed the nation. That's our focus, and we'll continue to work with our partners to deliver 2032 and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, let the Games, let the legacy, let the construction begin for 2032. Queensland is open for business. Thank you very much. I'm going to invite our special guest that I've invited up here to join me on stage. Please welcome Federal Infrastructure Minister Catherine King to say a few words. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks very much for that, and good afternoon, everybody. Can I too begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather and pay my respects to elders past and present. Can I thank very much the Queensland Media Club for accommodating my surprise addition to today's event, but also to the Deputy Premier for allowing me to gate crash, really, but I hope that you don't mind. On September 15, it will be 25 years since Sydney showed the world what Australia could do. Sydney 2000 didn't just give us weeks of incredible sport, it gave us generations of champions. Think about the athletes who are competing today, winning medals, inspiring kids across the country. Athletes who watched Cathy Freeman light that cauldron as children and who thought, I want to do that. Athletes who saw our swimmers dominate the pool and decided to join their local club the very next Monday. The way I see it, Brisbane 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games has the potential to do all of that again and so much more. But here's what we know now that wasn't fully realised in 2000. The real legacy of an Olympiad and a Paralympic Games isn't just the sporting moments that fill us with pride. It is the potential it ignites, the lasting legacy that it builds, the infrastructure that changes a city, a town, a community for the better, and provides possibilities for the way people live and play in your hometowns. It's the expanded transport networks that will move tens of thousands of spectators from every corner of the city to venues that will then continue to serve communities for decades. It is the public spaces that mean even if you don't score a ticket, you'll still visit to soak up the incredible atmosphere, and decades later, you'll remember just how that felt as you picnic with your family there. It's the sporting facilities where the world's best competed and are now where the next generation learns to swim, hit a ball, to run and to dream big. And that's why the Albanese Labor government is making an unprecedented investment in Australia's next games, and right here in Queensland. Today, as the Deputy Premier has said, we have reached an agreement with the Queensland Government to do just that. Let me put some of that in perspective for you. For Sydney 2000, the Commonwealth Government contributed around about $300 million towards the Games. That was significant at the time, and it helped deliver a Games we were all proud of. For Brisbane 2032, we're investing just over $3.4 billion, the single largest contribution of any Australian government has made towards sporting infrastructure in this country's history. And our agreement with Queensland will see both governments work together to deliver 16 new and upgraded venues across the state and a new Brisbane stadium at Victoria Park. For us, it is about ensuring that when we hand the keys back after the closing ceremony, Queensland has the infrastructure it needs to build on this incredible legacy for decades to come. Our most decentralised state will become home to the most decentralised games. The key infrastructure projects we're funding for Brisbane 2032, of course, are not limited to the state capital. These investments stretch from Cairns in the far north right down to the Gold Coast. They include venues in Logan, in Moreton Bay, on the Sunshine Coast. They aren't just games venues, they're community assets that will serve families for generations. When I drive through my own home state, and I'm a regional Victorian, my own patch, I often see and experience the infrastructure our parents and our grandparents built. The roads, the bridges, the community halls, the community swimming pools that are still serving us today. It's the test I often apply to the infrastructure decisions I make. Will this still make a difference in 50 years' time? Every single project that we're funding jointly through the Brisbane 2032 passes that test. Take the new stadium at Vic Park. Yes, it's been difficult. Yes, it will host the opening and closing ceremonies. Yes, it will be the centrepiece of the Games, but more importantly, it will be home for the AFL and for cricket in Queensland for the next century. It will attract major international sporting events and perhaps a concert or two. The venues we're funding under the Minor Venues program tell an even deeper story about lasting legacy. Our joint funding will deliver the National Aquatic Centre, an expanded Queensland Tennis Centre, the Toowoomba Equestrian Centre and a Parasports Centre at Chandler. It will also see, as we've heard, procurement work get underway today on projects including the Indoor Sports Centre at Logan and Moreton Bay, Barlow Park in Cairns and the Sunshine Coast Stadium. The new Logan Indoor Sports Centre will become one of South East Queensland's largest fully accessible multi-purpose sports centres. We know that Logan's population is set to exceed 500,000 by 2041, and this facility will serve that growing community for decades. 9 courts across 2 halls capable of hosting everything from local sporting competitions to national championships. Moreton Bay Indoor Sports Centre will be one of the largest multi-purpose, multi-use indoor sports facilities again in South East Queensland. 12 indoor courts, capacity for 10,000 spectators during the Games, but afterwards become the community hub for local kids learning to play basketball, netball and volleyball. And of course, up in Cairns, Barlow Park, currently home to the Northern Pride Rugby League team and Cairns Athletics. The upgrade will see the existing 1,700-seat stand increased to 5,000 permanent seats. But what I'm really excited to see is this venue continuing to support Far North Queensland's continued growth as a regional powerhouse for community-driven sport into the future. We are, of course, not just giving Queensland a blank cheque, though I know, Deputy Premier, you would like me to do that. For Brisbane 2032, this will mean robust project validation before we commit our final funding. We're doing our due diligence to ensure projects can be delivered on time, on budget, and that they do represent good value for taxpayers. For Brisbane Stadium, as part of our funding conditions, the Queensland Government and Brisbane City Council will develop a new precinct plan for the area with a focus on access to green space, a stakeholder engagement plan, as well as a transport connectivity plan. Appropriate consultation will also be undertaken with stakeholders including impacted communities and First Nations groups. We've already seen that approach work. 5 projects I mentioned, Logan, Moreton Bay, Barlow Park, Sunshine Coast and the Sunshine Coast Mountain Bike Centre as well, have all passed this validation process with the agreement we have reached and are now moving to procurement. But venues, of course, are only one part of the story. The Commonwealth is already investing over $12.4 billion in transport projects that will support the Games, and that is in addition to the $7.2 billion we're putting into the Bruce Highway Targeted Safety Package. That includes critical upgrades to the Bruce Highway, faster rail from Brisbane to the Gold Coast, and stage 1 of the direct Sunshine Coast Rail, providing that important link for those communities. These aren't just Games infrastructure projects, they're the transport networks that will continue Queensland's communities for the next 50 years. They will get people to work faster and safer, they'll move freight more efficiently, and they will open up new opportunities for regional development and for housing. None of this, of course, as the Deputy Premier has outlined, happens without strong partnerships, and I want to acknowledge the collaboration we have built with the Queensland Government. Deputy Premier and I haven't always agreed on everything. That is democracy. But we have worked together constructively to get this delivery plan right. We've listened to expert advice, we've made tough decisions where projects weren't going to work, and the establishment of GICA provides that governance structure we need to deliver these projects successfully. The intergovernmental agreement that underpins this collaboration is, now that we have reached an agreement, is being redrafted as we speak and will sign by the 2 governments shortly. Queensland has also taken action to streamline the approval processes while maintaining the appropriate safeguards. This will help ensure projects are delivered on time, which is critical when you've got such a hard fixed deadline. As I wrap up, I want to go back just briefly to Sydney 2000. Sydney gave us Cathy Freeman's golden moment. It gave us the triumph of our swimmers, our cyclists and our sailors. It showed the world that Australia could host a Games with warmth, with professionalism and that uniquely Australian sense of fun. And it was those 46,000 volunteers who greeted everybody in Sydney who made such an enormous difference. And they came from all across the country to Sydney to help. Brisbane 2032 will do all of that again. It will also leave behind a significant change to the landscape of Brisbane and beyond. When the last Games visitors go home, Queensland will have a transport network that is more frequent, more reliable and connects more places. It will have sporting facilities that are the envy of the world, and it will have grassroots infrastructure that gives every child the opportunity to discover their passion for sport. Most importantly, it will have shown that Queensland, including the regions, can host the world's biggest sporting event and do it better than anywhere else. The Commonwealth Government is proud to be Queensland's partner in this once-in-a-generation opportunity. We're bringing an unprecedented level of investment because we do believe in Queensland. To the young athletes who are watching today, dreaming of representing Australia at a home Olympic and Paralympic Games, we're building the facilities where you'll train. We're building the transport networks that will get you there. We're building the legacy that will inspire the generation that comes after you. To the communities across Queensland who'll host these facilities, we're not just building the venues for 4 weeks in 2032. We're building the infrastructure that will serve your children and your children's children. The countdown to Brisbane 2032 has begun in earnest. The hard work of delivery starts now, and I couldn't be more excited to see what Queensland, what Australia can do together. Thank you for having me here this afternoon.
whilst our MC makes his way up, Minister King and I are going to stage right, and we're going to exchange the official letters from the state government and the Commonwealth Government to seal the deal for the 2032 Games.
Thank you very much, Deputy Premier and Federal Minister for Infrastructure. It's a happy family, isn't it? But it wasn't always the way, was it? Deputy Premier, you talk about the work starting at Victoria Park. It's been 100 days since the government's 100-day review. When can Queenslanders expect to see tangible work, shovels in the ground, concrete rising at Victoria Park? Because as you touched on in your speech, we don't have a lot of time.
Well, yes, you're right, Hayden, we don't. And that's why today GECA have authorised now to start all the preliminary work. So all the geotechnical work that's got to take place, the soil testing that's got to take place, it's going to be starting from, I would suspect next week you're going to start seeing some work. I wouldn't say the excavators are going to be there next week, but certainly all the prelim work that has to take place in terms of the soil testing. Now, that has to happen because GECA then have to work out the best location for Victoria Park once they do the testing of the park.
One thing you mentioned in your speech but didn't touch too deeply on was Brisbane Arena. It sounds like we're not going to get Brisbane Arena before 2032. Can you make a guarantee that we will?
Oh, we absolutely will get it before 2032. The Gabba will come down after 2032, but the Brisbane Arena, the document that I just came back from the United States be part of Brisbane's next iconic destination, which is the Brisbane Arena. We've had over 200 expressions of interest put in through the website already on that. We are talking to the market at the moment about the GoPrint site and then the secondary site, which is the Gabba location, about whether it should be combined or two separate sites, depending on what the private sector want to do. But we absolutely will partner with the private sector. We will go to procurement on the Brisbane Arena by the end of this year. So I would suspect in the next couple of months, my Department of Infrastructure and Planning, will actually formally go to procurement to build the arena. And then next year will be the planning, and I suspect you'll start seeing it being built from end of next year and into 2027, and it'll be built absolutely before 2032.
You mentioned in your speech too you'd like to see more transport investment from the federal government. Minister King, are you open to that? How much money will Queensland provide? Perhaps we could just get our GST back.
I knew someone would mention that. I just wondered if that would happen. Already the Commonwealth is investing, I think it's over $27 billion in transport infrastructure here in Queensland. I think in equivalent states, I think you're the highest amount. Every other state is less than that already. So that is the first thing I'd say. I think also there are issues around capacity, that you can only build so much at any one time. Our priority has absolutely been Bruce Highway. You saw us come in January with the Prime Minister, acknowledge that that is an unfinished piece of business for all of us, and we're very determined to get that done. That being said, we're already investing over $12 billion in games infrastructure. We will look at new requests that come through. They come through from every state and territory pretty regularly, I can say, that come through for Queensland in our normal budget processes. We don't have a budget yet until next year, but really we've been very determined to make sure we put planning money in, we put planning work in, we get a good idea about what the costs are, and then we progress from there. And I'm sure Queensland will do what every other state does and ask for its share of funding.
I might open up to the working media table for the first question.
Deputy Premier, Fraser Barton from Australian Associated Press asked you when the delivery plan was announced in March about workers and construction and how we're going to get all these workers. How has the government progressed that? Are we still going to, quote, ransack New South Wales and Victoria for people? And where will all of these workers live given housing shortages in the state?
Well, thank you. Great question. I don't think I used the word ransack. I said beg, borrow and steal. And now that I've signed the deal with the federal minister, I guess I can trash Victoria because you want to live in Victoria or Queensland? So, interestingly, yesterday I had the infrastructure partnerships. I had a meeting with Infrastructure Partnerships Australia, and we talked about this very issue about the workforce and where they're going to come from. It's going to be mixed. It's going to be homegrown talent with the apprenticeships and traineeships coming through the system. It's going to be new businesses coming into Queensland. It will be looking to New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia, and getting businesses to relocate to Queensland. Unashamedly, we need to do that. It's going to be looking at the school migration sector. So that's how we'll get the workforce. The second question I always get about the workforce is, where are you going to house them? Well, 20,000 in Logan, because I've just given the mayor 135 million, but that 135 million pales into insignificant compared to the rest that I'm about to announce over the next 2 weeks, which is the Residential Activation Fund. And that's a catalytic infrastructure fund designed to help councils get the infrastructure to build the houses. So Mayor Raven at Logan, he said in the media last week that the Logan Council would stop approving buildings if they didn't have the new wastewater treatment plant. So the 135 million the state are co-contributing with the council will allow that wastewater treatment facility to be put in place, unlocking 20,000 homes. Now, that $2 billion infrastructure fund is happening all around Queensland, and over 50% of that is going to be in regional Queensland. So we've got to make sure that we support councils to unlock the land. And as I always say, the issue of the housing crisis is supply, supply, supply. It is the biggest inhibitor at the moment for building houses in Queensland. We have already abolished a tax. We abolished stamp duty for first homers buying or building their first home in Queensland. So that's great. We've got a better taxation regime. We've increased the first homeowner grant to 30,000 from 15 to 30. We've kept that in the budget last week. So that's a good incentive as well. So we've got to build the houses, but you can't just do it in isolation. You've got to look at all of it at the same time.
Deputy Premier Alex Brewster, ABC News. You've refuted reports about the infrastructure around Victoria Park Stadium this morning. When can we expect to see the detail of things like a potential train station, pedestrian bridge, and even a warm-up track around that stadium?
You use the word refute, Alex. I use the word, I think TMR may have done some brainstorming on where they would like to see certain things and stations. Government have not made decisions on that connectivity yet. And GECA now, as part of the legislation we passed last week, a big proportion of that is transport and mobility. So those plans now, because the legislation has been put in place, those plans now have to GECA with the Department of Transport and Main Roads. And I'll repeat, on the transport front, it's the state's responsibility, and we haven't asked the federal government for any more money in respect to that connectivity at this stage. Minister Brent Mickelberg may have good negotiations with Minister King later on. We've got to work with the host city. We've got to work with the Gold Coast Council as well, because of the faster rail between the Gold Coast and the Brisbane. The wave on the Sunshine Coast with the federal government are committing 50% funding in stage 1 of that project. So, look, it'll happen fairly quickly now. I anticipate that GECA have the legislation, they'll have a CEO in a very short period of time, and they'll be able to get on with the job and work with TMR to, the best location for Victoria Park. And that's why you can't put the cart before the horse, because you've got to do all the geotech, which we are now doing on Victoria Park, to understand where the best location for the stadium actually is, then look at the transport hub. Incidentally, I would note that if you look at Victoria Park, Centenary Pool, which is going to be the new National Aquatic Centre, and the Ekka, we've just opened Exhibition Station over at the RNA. There is 3 or 4 hubs within 15-minute walking already around that. If we can increase it, that's great, but we'll now work and get to work with the Brisbane City Council and TMR.
Deputy Premier Harry Clarke from Sky News. How committed are you to holding Olympics rowing on the mighty Fitzroy at Rockhampton, given the resistance, including that which is coming from internationally?
Very committed. It's in our delivery plan, and I spoke to the IOC. And look, I've got to say that the International Olympic Committee were very good with us in our discussions with that. Now, as Minister King points out in her contribution observations before, like any of the venues, we have to go through the PVR process, the project validation process. The 5 projects that have already been validated, that's what we're going to procurement on from today. But all of the minor venues obviously have to go through project validation. We did a lot of the project validation whilst federal government was in caretaker mode from my department to look at the costings and all of that. We believe it's vitally important for Rocky and the kids in Rocky to have a facility. And there has been a lot of public commentary about it. But my God, if you go to Rocky, which I think I'm there in a couple of days, if you go to Rocky this time of year, in July, when the Olympic and Paralympic Games are going to be held, the Fitzroy River is a mirror. It is the most beautiful thing, hence why they do state championships and national championships on the mighty Fitzroy River. And I respectfully said to the International Olympic Committee when they were over here, I said, if it's okay for Rocky kids and Australian kids to row on the mighty Fitzroy River, it's okay for Pierre from Paris to row on the mighty Fitzroy River. And look, the IOC took that well. Not the French guy, but the rest of them did.
Has anyone contacted Pierre to ask him what he thinks about it? You've used it a few times now.
I don't know, but we did. Someone was in the crowd and he did jump up and he said, "I'm actually Pierre from Paris." He said, "But I'm not a rower." And I said, "Well, maybe you should be."
But Deputy Premier, in seriousness though, the government has been staunch. Your Sports Minister colleague said he is certain Olympic rowing will be held in Rockhampton. But do you acknowledge that it is not only the government's decision, it is the IOC or the International Federation? And is there a plan B if they say it's not good enough?
Well, okay, but is the IOC paying for it? If they don't want it in Rocky, then they pay for it, but they're not. It's the state government and the federal government. So I'm not sure the IOC, we have pushed back a little bit on the IOC, but we've done it very respectfully because we wanted the games to be about regional Queensland. And we committed to the people of Rockhampton, who have a great rowing facility, and they're going to have a better rowing facility. And Minister King and I, and I'm not breaching confidence, we've had this discussion about rowing. It's got to go, the International Olympic Committee Rowing Federation are actually over here in July. They'll do all their technical assessments, but that happens with every venue. And in LA, the rowing facility does not meet the International Olympic Committee requirements. It's too short. But you know what they did? They just said, for the LA, it'll be okay, and they signed off on it. So they do bend the rules for other venues, including rowing in LA, which does not meet the requirements for international rowing.
Deputy Premier, hi, Jesmine Cheong here from SBS World News. Just a couple of questions from NITV. Are you consulting with traditional owners to reach an agreement on preserving cultural heritage at Vic Park? And do you think you'll reach an agreement, or will you override cultural heritage laws?
I think we'll reach an agreement. 2 observations I'll make on that. In the legislation that we passed Parliament last week, there were 2 elements to the overriding provisions. One was dealing with environment laws, heritage laws, planning laws, local government laws, and there was a complete override. But we actually did carve out the cultural heritage provisions for First Nations Australians. So we actually will still go through a process of consulting with First Nations about Victoria Park. Now, ultimately, if an agreement can't be reached, then the laws have to override. But we actually have put a special provision pursuant to the cultural heritage legislation that exists in Queensland at the moment to still go through that process. And part of the deal that we've struck with the federal government, it was one of the requirements from Minister King and the federal government, is that consultation does take place, which we have committed to, and that's in the legislation. That'll go through the process through Minister Fiona Simpson's department, as it does under existing legislation. And we've also committed to Minister King and the federal government that community consultation, looking at the precinct plan, looking for as much green space, open space we can retain in Victoria Park, and we've committed to that. So I'm confident that we will. I'm confident that we'll secure support, and we'll just go through the motions as it is at the moment. But we did carve out a particular provision in that, recognising the significance of that issue.
Andrew from The Guardian, this is a question for both of you. Both of you have gone through elections in the last year, in fact 2 months ago, and in neither case was this plan, the Victoria Park plan, brought to the electorate. In fact, at the state level, it was explicitly ruled out. Shouldn't the electorate have known about this before they voted on it? It's a big old stadium in the middle of a suburb. Surely people would have liked to know that before the decision was made.
Well, thank you. I'll start. And thankfully, you've got a question. I was hoping putting you up here, divert all the questions to you. But look, when we announced the delivery plan, the Premier and I were pretty upfront. We apologised. We said sorry. We took a position to the election of no new stadiums. We did the 100-day review, and there was also the former government did the Quirk review that recommended Victoria Park. We did take to the election no new stadiums, but it became apparent during the GECA review and the 100-day review that there was just no other alternative. There was no time now to knock down the Gabba and rebuild the Gabba. The displacement of AFL in cricket was too great and too costly. So we were pretty upfront. I think we said in a room of 1,000 people and journos, we stood up and apologised, and we said we'll cop that. It's not the position we took to the election, but it's the position now that we think is in the best interest of all Queensland, and particularly for the 2032 games, particularly for AFL, the Lions, the Mighty Lions, and cricket. So, yeah, I'm not hiding behind the fact that we had a different position at the election, but I think we tried as best we could explain ourselves why we did change our position and why we put it in the delivery plan and accepted the recommendations from GECA. Because if we hadn't of, you would have ended up with a government making political decisions again, and it would have gone around in circles, and you would not be in a room today with the federal minister and the state minister having done a deal, struck a deal to deliver the 2032 games. You'd be talking about temporary stadiums at QSAC of spending $2.25 billion and no procurement process underway. And I think it is a different position we took to the election, but we're pretty upfront with it. We apologise, but we said to Queenslanders it's now our job to explain why we took that position to the election and explain why we think it is now in the best interest of Queenslanders to get on and proceed and do it as soon as we can.
Thanks. And I'd say equally from our point of view is that the delivery plan was provided and the Queensland Government's response to that in March of this year. We wanted to take some time to look at it and to get the details about, what are the costings of venues, what does that look like? Publicly, I've been very upfront about that. It's been in the Courier Mail, as has the Prime Minister, that we're really keen to see an arena. It's why we put the Commonwealth's money there. The Prime Minister's a pretty big fan of live music, and we felt, from our point of view, that was a good legacy. But that project is now being procured by the private sector. That is the decision the Queensland Government has made, and we've been faced with the decision, well, given that it is no longer a games venue and the agreement is about games venues in terms of funding, what do we do with that? And that's why we've taken our time. We've looked at the finances. We have put conditions around the stadium. We recognise that it is a challenging issue for First Nations people, for local green space. We want to make sure that it's got right and that it is a precinct that everybody can enjoy, and that's why we've taken our time to do that, and we're making this announcement today.
Deputy Premier Alex Brewster again. Have you turned your mind to what you might like to see the stadium called? I know you're a proud monarchist. Would you perhaps like to see it named after a royal, maybe?
Yeah. I love the King too.
Actually, thinking about that, Minister King did not put in her letter of agreement anything about how King Stadium, in honour of either Charles or Catherine. There you go. Thank you. Food for thought. Thank you, Alex. No, look,
You joked in Parliament that it would be the John Sosso Stadium.
Well, some people in Queensland have a big fascination with my Director General. He just wants to get on with the job and stay out of the press. But no, look, we GECA recommended it be named the Brisbane Stadium, iconic. Just travelling back from the States, all the stadiums over there are named. They do funding deals. Incidentally, all the stadiums are built by the private sector. So if there's anyone in the room today who wants to chip in as well and help Minister King and I balance our budgets a little more and invest, because I kept asking I went to SoFi, I went to AT&T, and I said, what level of investment from government you had in all these? And I said, oh, no, the billionaires that own the sporting teams just build these things. And I said, geez, wow, okay, Lions, I've got to put in a bit more, I think, in cricket. But no, we haven't turned our mind to that yet. We'll just let us get shovels in the ground, let's start building it, and then we'll work out the name of it.
Minister King, can I just jump in there and ask you, when you were negotiating with the state government, did the Commonwealth put to the state that rowing could be held in Penrith?
So what we've done as part of the agreement is we've provisioned money for Rockhampton, but that is conditional or dependent on the federated body for rowing, determining that rowing can go forward there. Obviously, we'll await that decision, but we've provisioned money for Rockhampton for that to occur. And again, that's the decision that the Queensland Government has done, that's what it wants to do. And obviously, if there's a different decision taken, we'll work with the Queensland Government on that. But you've heard the Deputy Premier is pretty determined that's where rowing's going to be.
We've also heard the Prime Minister suggest Penrith. What's your view?
Again, I think that the Prime Minister is a problem solver, and I think he knows that there are some challenges with Rockhampton, but we'll let the Rowing Federation go and have a look at those and make a decision from there. And we've provisioned money for that venue as part of the minor venues program, and we'll work through the processes. And if needs to be a plan B, then that'll be a matter for discussion with the Queensland Government. But as I said, you can hear the Deputy Premier is pretty determined that that's where rowing's going to be, and we'll let the Federation do its work.
Mackenzie Scott here from the Australian newspaper. Obviously, you've inked this $7.1 billion deal today, but you have the Treasurer David Janetzki has launched his team to start privatisation of certain large infrastructure projects. How much do you expect the private sector to tip in a monetary sense into games infrastructure?
Well, we have provisioned the $7.1 billion. That's the deal. That was the federal government have got a capped amount as well. So it equates to, if you look at the $7.1 billion, it's not 50-50. It's nearly 50-50. We'll call it nearly 50-50. It's a couple of $100 million less than the federal contribution. Is about a couple of $100 million less than our contribution. We've stuck to that. We've stuck to that $7.1 billion figure. Now that doesn't include private sector investment. So we've budgeted on the provision that is what it's going to take for the state and the Commonwealth to get those venues, the major venues and minor venues done. If the private sector come into the market and assist GECA with stadia development, minor venues, then that's a bonus. That's a bonus for the federal government and for the state government. Those discussions have to take place with GECA, but that will go through the procurement process. So it's not that we've announced that the private sector will build Victoria Park. We haven't announced that at all. We have budgeted the money. As I said, our budget's got $5.15 billion over the next 4 years for Olympic and Paralympic infrastructure. So it's state and Commonwealth funding, and we've kept it at 7.1. And Catherine and I were talking about this before we came in today, and there's a lot of people talking to us, but blowouts. And I said, yeah, but you've got to, don't be guided by the 10 years of blowouts from previous governments in Queensland. There are businesses in Queensland and nationally that actually deliver things on time and on budget. So we can't be in that mindset that everything is just going to blow out. We've got to make sure we try and do it on time and on budget. And our budget is 7.1, and we've not shifted from that.
Deputy Premier Rosanna Kingsun from 7 News. Can you rule out whether there will be a new train station at the Olympic Park there, as in the paper, or is that not a consideration at all? And a question for Minister King, what would you like to see the state government and Brisbane City Council include in their new precinct plan?
Rosie, thank you for the question. I'm not ruling anything in or out about the transportation, because what we need to do is work out what will be the best public transportation system around RNA, Victoria Park, the new stadium, and also the National Aquatic Centre. So I'm not going to rule anything in or out. I'll be guided by the experts. They've got a job to do now to work out what that transportation plan looks like, new stations, no stations. So we'll be open to any of the suggestions that come forward, but it's got to be in the best interest of the commuters to get people around all the venues.
And that's really what we're looking for in terms of the transport and mobility plan, not just, obviously how people are going to move around the venues, and obviously the IOC and Australian Olympic Committee will also be interested in those issues. In terms of the precinct overall, I think what you'll see across the globe at the moment is that where stadiums are being built, we're not the only country that is facing challenges of people being concerned about the costs of those, loss of greens, but all of those things. And what you're seeing, and I think there's some really interesting examples in the US, in Queens, for example. I had the incredible privilege of being able to go and have a look a couple of years ago now at Tottenham Hotspur's new stadium and what they did around there, around being able to provide education opportunities for a really incredibly disadvantaged community. And as I said in my speech, really, I'm interested in what infrastructure unlocks, not just from sport. We can sort of see what that legacy, what that looks like. But really the opportunity we have here is to really shape cities and to shape the way people live and move about and enjoy those cities. And really that's what we're looking for in the precinct plan, because we know long after the games are finished, people live in these communities and we want them to be able to utilise those facilities, utilise the green space, be able to utilise transport and love where they live. And that is challenging. As I said, it's we're not the only country in the world. You might be aware there's an election in Tasmania at the moment, and the issue around that there. With us, in the same way we've said, we've funded the Macquarie Point precinct. We just haven't funded just a stadium. We've funded what the life is going to look like down in that particular part of the world. So that's really the sort of thing we'll be looking for from both a transport and a precincts point of view.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that's where we'll have to leave it, but I'm sure we'll have many more of these events in the lead up to 2032. Please join me in thanking the Deputy Premier and the Federal Infrastructure Minister.